Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was a...
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys podcast radio show. If you are listening, our show is about the paranormal, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, and beyond anything beyond the normal limit of explanation. If you are listening for the first time, I am your host, Garrett Jagaman, and we do bring you 2 shows per month. One show with me and my co-host, Daniel James, where we pick over specific discussions and topics, dive deep into those topics, and give our theories, answer listeners' questions and calls, and from time to time bring personalities on the show within the paranormal realm, whether it be an author in the paranormal field, a paranormal investigator, someone in the occult, or a cryptozoologist. We will have fun personalities on the show from time to time, and as I said, every time you hear me and Daniel together on that specific episode or show, we will be bringing you in-depth topics. The 28th of this month, August 2019, we will be doing a show on night terrors, sleep paralysis, and other nighttime demons and sightings. So make sure you tune in for that one. It's going to be a fun and great show. And then the other show per month, which is tonight's show, we will be taking on listeners' calls and listening to their experiences and encounters that they have faced throughout their life. If you are listening to the show, make sure you hit the share button and the follow button. We would love to have you follow us and listen to all of our episodes that we bring you. And if you have missed our first launch episode, you can check that out on any one of our streaming platforms that we are airing through, whether that be Spreaker, who we host the show through, whether that be iHeartRadio, iTunes, Amazon, Apple Music, CastBox, Spotify, or any other online major retailer or platform. You can check us out, whether it's old episodes, current episodes, or upcoming episodes. Make sure you follow us and watch out for that. Share us around to your family member and friends, because the bigger reach that we get, the more things that we can continue to do with the show, and we have a lot of fun things that we plan on bringing you on this specific show. Tonight, we are going to tell you several different great encounters and stories, not only from myself, but we have 3 different callers on the line tonight from 3 different areas of the country, and we are happy to have them on the show and to hear what it is that they've encountered in their life. Then we'll talk a little bit about that. I will give my take on their experiences, and we'll see what kind of fun that we can run into. Now, I want to forewarn you guys, I have a little bit of an idea of the things that they're going to talk about tonight, but not fully. I like to at least get a glimpse into it so that I know if it's show-worthy, and then I let them kind of tell me at the same time that they're telling you, so it's fresh to everybody. So I'm very excited to hear what these guys have to say tonight. This is the first episode of listeners calling in and sharing their experiences, and it's going to be very exciting. As I said, we will be bringing you that and our other show, or same show, but other episode. I'm sure you're watching out for that. Me and Daniel will be together talking about the sleep paralysis and nighttime demons and night terrors, as I said, on August 28th. And this specific show will be airing on the 21st. We are pre-recording this on the 14th. So thank you once again for listening in, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it. First and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and give a story myself. I won't do that every episode, but from time to time, I would like to share my own story, and I have a great one for you this evening. For many, many years of my life, I've been very into the paranormal and always have been very, and I hate to use the word sensitive, but been very sensitive to seeing and experiencing things in ways that others haven't. And for many years of my life, that was very, very, big for me and something that I was involved with. And many years back, I took a sidestep away from that to launch my company, Brutal Business Entertainment, focus on that for several years to get it to where I wanted it to be. And it's at that point now where it's allowed me the free time to be able to get back into one of my other passions aside from entertainment and music, which is the paranormal and paranormal investigations. So it's been quite some time since I've done an investigation, so I needed to get back into it because I am assembling a paranormal investigative team, and we are going to be going out to many different big attractions out there that are famous for paranormal activity, as well as doing a lot of private residences for people that are hiring us to come in and check out what is going on within their home. So I needed to get back into it and get a refresher. And I went out to a local graveyard, not expecting to experience anything the first time out. You can go out 20 times and not see or hear anything, or you can go out 10 times in a row and see it each time. But I had no high hopes of experiencing anything this specific time. Figured that we would get out, get my feet wet a little bit, and get back into it. But I'll tell you what I experienced this day was quite shocking. I show up at the graveyard. I'm walking around for about 45 to 50 minutes, using my spirit box to try to communicate. For those that don't know what a spirit box is, it is a device that scans very fast through multiple radio frequencies and adds a white noise hiss on top of that. And the theory behind that is that ghosts and spirits can use the different chopped up sound bits of human voice and the white noise to be able to piece together and communicate through that and talk to you. I have had a lot of good results over the years with spirit boxes, and today, or this specific story I'm telling you on that day, was definitely one of those. Actually, the most profound that I've ever personally had. Now, for the first 45, 50 minutes, nothing happened, nothing out of the ordinary. Couple random, voices came through and words that could just be bleed through from the box itself, so I didn't think too heavily into it. This specific day, I was questioning myself and questioning the spirits whether or not I should get back into the paranormal, because it has been so long since I've been involved, so long since I've had a profound experience, other than some small things here and there, that I didn't know if it was right for me to try to get back into this. So about 45 to 50 minutes in, I guess I was probably getting a little frustrated, but remain calm, because your mood is very dependent upon the type of experiences you have. And I simply asked, should I be doing this? Is there anyone here, or is this a waste of my time? Do I no longer have the gift that I once had? If you are out there, will you please respond to me? About 30 seconds later, I did have a woman's voice that came through clear as day and said, I am here. Now, for anybody who's used spirit boxes, it's choppy. It chops up, chop, 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 chop. So you'll get pieces and fragments of a voice, but when you hear a solid sentence or solid few words in a row without it skipping, that's how you know it is an actual contact. This was the case. It was, I am here. 3 solid words, clear as day, from a female woman's voice. I stayed in that area for a little bit longer, asking questions. Nothing came through. So, I am a skeptic, and I'm also a believer. And what I mean by that is I do believe, and I have experienced a lot of things, but I stay skeptical on certain things, that I don't automatically assume everything I see, hear, and feel is automatically a spirit. Too many times do I see in this field and on different pages that I follow, someone slap up a picture of the woods or slap up a picture of the darkness, and you could see 4 or 5 faces in it, but really those faces are nothing. It's your imagination. It's what looks like a shape that could be somewhat misconstrued as a face, and then people were like, I've seen ghosts. Sometimes you do, but most of the time these pictures and things I'm seeing people post are fake, or they are just someone's misunderstanding of what spirits and things really are. So I kind of let that voice go, and I continued to walk through the graveyard. About 15 minutes later, I am walking in an old section of the graveyard, which was old Polish graves, all from the 1800 period, and they're all the exact same tombstone, white stone of some sort, maybe a limestone or sandstone, and they all have white crosses on the top of them. Well, as I'm walking over towards them, all of a sudden I hear on my spirit box not a voice, but what sounds like a jack-in-the-box or a music box, something that sounds like a child's toy that you would crank above their crib when they're a baby. So right away I heard it, and it played for about 5 or 6 seconds, and then it stopped. Well, that's not something normal that you hear on a spirit box. So right away when I heard that, I was kind of taken back, and I stood there, wowed for a moment, like, what was that? So I started looking around, seeing if I picked up any vibes, because one thing any paranormal investigator will tell you, it's not always about what you see and hear. It's very much so about what you feel. You have to know to pick up atmospheric changes in the air and to notice those. And I didn't feel anything specifically at that moment, but I'm looking around and I noticed in that area of gravestones, there was one specific gravestone that was different than all the rest. So something told me I should go over there and check it out. As I walk over and check out the gravestone, I notice that it is very new compared to the others from the 1800s. This one is within the last few years, and this is a child's. This is a 2-year-old toddler's. At that moment, it really put me back like, wow, I heard the kid's toy, and sure enough, right near me was a child's grave. So I tried to communicate with him, and I used his name and asked if he was trying to communicate with me. And this is when the most profound thing happened, spirit box-wise, that I've ever faced. All of a sudden, what was a very loud and surrounding fire whistle goes off. Now, at first, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary, because actually, ironically enough, I was in about 700 yards distance of a firehouse and fire station. So I, didn't think much of it at the time. But I went ahead and turned my box down real quick, waiting for the sirens to end so I could try to pick back up where I left off. As I turned the volume down, right away, all of a sudden the fire alarm went away. The fire siren went away. And I was like, wait a second, there's no way this was coming through the spirit box. So I turned it back up. As I turned it back up, there goes the whistle again. It was so loud, and it did not seem like it was coming from the box. It seemed like it was surrounding me. It seemed like it was happening, that everyone could hear this. There was no one else in the graveyard but me, though. So I turned the volume back down to a complete off. I actually switched it off. And when I did, instantly, dead. Sirens stopped. At this point, I had realized that the sirens were coming from this box, and there was someone indeed trying to communicate with me. Now, I've had other people that I've told the story to recently maybe said that maybe someone close by, or maybe even this child had died in a fire, and they were trying to portray that to me. And I can't validate that theory, because I don't know the history of this child or the history of everyone in that area of the graveyard, but I do know that I did in fact hear a child's toy, and then I did hear 2 fire sirens coming both from my spirit box, which was pretty amazing. So at that point, I did stay in the area for a little bit longer, and no other communication came through, so I continued to walk through the graveyard. I get about maybe 20 to 30 yards from the original spot where I heard the fire whistles, and that is when I actually felt an atmospheric change, as I mentioned previously. All of a sudden, I just felt extremely calm and at ease. And I stood there and kind of took that feeling in. It felt very comfortable, very relaxing. And I noticed, when I did that, I was standing in front of one specific grave. And one of the coolest things that I've experienced in a long time, which, certainly was a sign to me, was of the peace and the love that spirits can share with us. It's not always bad, it's not always good. There's definitely both sides, and actually this story will touch on both. But there was 3 individual orange flowers, not a bushel of flowers, but simply a flower here, a middle, and then one to the right. As I'm standing looking at this grave and these 3 flowers and feeling at ease, 3 blue butterflies fly through the air and land on each of the 3 flowers. Now, someone could say that's just ironic, but here's the thing. It could have been 2 butterflies, and it's only been 2 of the flowers. It could have been 4 of them. It could have been all of them landed on 1 or 2 of the flowers, but no. 3 blue butterflies, identical to one another, flew over at the time that I felt at ease and was staring at these flowers, and landed on each of the 3 flowers and just sat there. I did, in fact, get a picture of these 3 butterflies, and not much longer after me snapping the first pic, and it wasn't the best pic, but I did get it. I tried to get a better one, and as I was going to take it, they all flew off. So at that point, I was very pleased with the results that I had gotten. I decided to call it quits for the day, and I started walking back to my vehicle. I, put all my equipment away. I climb in my vehicle to leave, and then one of the most shocking things that I've experienced in a while had happened to me, which I'll explain in a moment. But this was truly a great outing, because not only amazing spirit box communication, atmospheric changes, and signs from beyond, and then there was also the demonic part of it, which I'm telling you now. As I was leaving the graveyard, my vehicle did not have any type of smell on the way in. As I was leaving, it did not have any smell on the way out. My windows were up the entire time, so nothing could have seeped into my vehicle. There was nothing in my vehicle that could have been making this smell, and nothing outside had this smell. As I got into the vehicle and I drove to the, out of the first gate of the graveyard, still no smell. As I left and went down the hill to start heading towards my home, I got the overwhelming smell of sulfur, or what smells like rotten eggs. And at first I was just thinking it's probably something outside, didn't pay much mind to it. As I kept going down the hill, it amplified stronger and stronger to the point where it was actually hard to breathe and drive at the same time. I reached over and put my window down thinking to try to get myself fresh air. It did not stop, so I'm thinking, okay, it's coming from outside. Something outside is very, very strong right now. So I leaned my head out the window, and at that time, I noticed that outside the air smells as fresh as can be. So then I'm confused, and I'm like, wait a second, it's not coming from outside. And anyone who studies demonology and studies a lot about paranormal activity and spirits and signs knows that they can also give off smells, a lot of different smells, whether it be a loved one's perfume or cologne, whether it be someone else's smell of perfume or cologne, whether it be the smell of cookies baking, which I've heard from people talking, in homes that they were in and things of that nature. There is also an evil side to it, and often in times of demons and demonology, the smell that's associated with that is sulfur or rotten eggs, or something rotten in general. But that the rotten eggs and sulfur is used quite heavily, and certainly not heavenly, and quite often. So at that point, I'm like, oh my, I think this was the opposite sign. I had gotten signs today that I didn't expect to get, telling me that I probably should be doing this again because I do have a special gift in this field, and I got the peaceful harmony type vibes. Now I'm getting the opposite side to remind me, or at least that's what I took it as a sign to remind me, as much good as there is out there, there's certainly an evil side to this, and we have to be careful. So I continued to drive home. I just wanted to get home, get out of this car, get out of this smell because it was following me. It wouldn't stop. As I get to my driveway and pull in, I climb out of my car. Now, as a quick side note, anytime I climb into my vehicle, I always look at the seat prior to climbing in and sitting down. Make sure I'm not sitting on my sunglasses, my wallet that I could have sat down, anything of that nature. There was nothing on my seat when I climbed in. My windows, as I've already mentioned, were not open on the way in or the way out. I'd seen my seat several times at this point, and there was nothing on it. As I climbed out of my vehicle and turned around to shut the door, I noticed that side by side, facing the same direction, same size, same look, are two very, very large black horseflies. Now, someone could just say that's just, it's ironic, they were just there, they snuck in. No, because if I would have sat on them on the drive home, they would have been smashed or smushed. They were not. They were fully intact. They were both very large black horseflies, a lot larger than your normal horsefly. I mean, these things looked like they were mutated, like they had gotten radiation of some sort. And they were both sitting side by side, facing the same direction, fully intact. And someone would say, okay, whatever. Well, I thought that they were alive, so I went to swipe my hand at them to get them out of my car. At that point, I noticed they were both dead. Fully preserved, dead horseflies that couldn't have been under me or would have been smashed, somehow appearing on my seat after smelling the smell of sulfur, after everything else I had experienced. Now, as someone who, as I said, studies demonology, studies, the different signs to look out for, two very big things, one of which I mentioned was the smell of sulfur. The second is flies, both of which are associated with demons, both of which are associated with the devil and Lucifer. At this point, I was very taken back, and I kind of made a stupid move at that point. And instead of getting those flies and taking them somewhere else and disposing them there, I just swiped them out of my seat into my yard. Well, if you're having signs of demons or anything evil, you shouldn't probably put that near your home. Now, luckily, I have a lot of precautionary measures that I use at home to keep these things at bay as best I can and keep them out of my home. And I've done very good so far because I do a lot of investigations and have done several since this specific story. And I always try to keep them away, but that was a dumb move on my part to sweep them into the car. Or sweep them into the yard, excuse me. That night, my mother was staying because she was helping watch my newborn, because later that night I had a show. I am a musical performer, so I left and was out of town that night, and my mother was here helping watch my child. She experienced something this night. Now, this one sounds a little crazy, but we keep a back spare bedroom with the same bedroom set, same blankets and comforter. We have it always orange side up. It's reversible, so you can use orange or blue, but we always have the orange side up, and we have them tucked in very tight. We actually talked to my mother that night and apologized to her because we have 2 cats, and the cats often lay in that spare bed, and there was cat hair all over the orange side of that blanket, and I apologized to her that we didn't get a chance to wash it before her coming. She said she was not worried about it. It was not a big deal. She went to bed that night. I got home very late, about 3 or 4 in the morning for my show. The next morning I woke up, she had already left for the day, but she had called me. I actually woke up to her phone call saying, I think you brought home something with you yesterday when you did your investigation. Now, that's not common for my mom to talk about that stuff, and even though she's experienced a lot with me, her house growing up was very, very haunted, and we'll talk about that another time. She had mentioned to me that when she woke up, the blue side was facing up, not the orange side. She did not do it. She went to bed with the orange side facing up. It was tucked in so tight that you couldn't just pull it out. You'd actually have to get out of the bed and yank it underneath the mattress itself to get it free. Well, it was opposite side, blue side facing up, tucked in very tightly. I know for a fact, my wife and my mother all know for a fact that the orange side was facing up. So that was a sign. And since then, there have been a couple small things that have happened within the home over the last several weeks. Lights flickering on and off, power going on and off, but when it comes back on, nothing resets. It's right back to where it was. Could just be a power outage, could just be a flicker. As I said, I am skeptical on certain things, but there have been certain signs since that moment that have felt like there was more to it than just those coincidences. So that is my story for this evening, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have questions on it, leave them in the comments. This is not a live show as our other one with Dan is, where we talk about subject matter and in-depth conversations. The one where we take on listeners, sometimes they might be live, a lot of times they'll be pre-recorded, so we can't talk to you live or see your questions and comments live. But if you do leave them, we will certainly do our best to answer them back or address them on another show. And I'm happy that you guys listened to my story tonight. And we're going to go ahead here and get jumping into our first call. But as I said, if you have any questions or concerns, please leave them in the comments and we will address them and get back to you. Same thing goes with any of our phone calls tonight or our callers. If you have any questions for their stories, anything you would like to address or wonder about, please let us know and we will certainly get back to you. So first up on the calls tonight, we have Aaron from Florida. He's going to tell us a little bit about his experiences. All right, well, Aaron, we appreciate you being on the show tonight. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us, the stories and the encounters that you faced.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. My name is Aaron. I go by Sleep Lyrical. The first thing that actually happened to me, it isn't the first thing, but this is the first thing I want to talk about. I actually started dating this girl over in Tampa, Florida, and I actually went to go stay the night with her. I was staying a weekend with her, and she went to work, and I just happened to pass out in the bed. Well, I went to go wake up, and it was like I was aware of everything that was going on around me, but I couldn't move at all. Couldn't move my legs, my arms. I could move my eyes, couldn't move my mouth or anything like that. And I was laying there. I felt like it was maybe 5 minutes I was laying there, and then all of a sudden I see my girlfriend come walking in the house. And I'm trying to yell at her hey, help me, wake me up. And then all of a sudden it was like something, I felt like a pressure on my chest. And then, I just happened to look up and it's this old lady just sitting there. She's sitting on my chest, dude. And I can't breathe. And it's like she's screaming at me, but I couldn't hear her screaming. And then at this point, in my mind, I don't know exactly what was going on, but it's like in my mind, I was screaming out to my girlfriend, hey, wake me up. But she just wouldn't respond to me. And then finally, it felt like maybe it was an hour. I was stuck like this. And finally, I just snapped out of it and I was able to wake up, and that just bugged me out really, really bad. After that, I had her take me back home. I didn't want to stay there no more.
Well, I can imagine not wanting to stay there after that. And that's actually a common thing, because as I said, and I'm not sure how much you know about my background of these type of things, but I have been heavily in the paranormal investigative side for many, many years, including investigating a lot of locations, homes in different areas, whether it be regular spirits, demonic spirits, I've got to witness and see and experience a lot of things. One thing I personally have never experienced, thankfully, is sleep paralysis. But a lot of people who have fallen victim to that or have experienced that have actually said very similar things to the story that you just mentioned. They've stated about how the fact that it felt like they were awake, but at the same time felt like they were asleep. They were cognitive and could see, hear, and be aware of their surroundings, but still at the same time could not move, as if they were in a sleep state. And one of the things that you mentioned that's very intriguing is the old woman. I've actually talked to and have heard several, not only people that I've talked to, but in other stories and other investigators that I've listened to their tapes and listened to their encounters with people who have encountered great, things such as yourself. They have mentioned a lot of times an old woman. So that's very interesting, actually. And a lot of times the restrictive feeling of being unable to breathe. So did it feel like someone was choking you? Did it feel like someone was putting their weight on your chest? How would you describe that pressure that you were feeling?
It was like if I was like standing up against a brick wall and a car was just pushing up against my chest. Like my chest was real tight. I couldn't really breathe. I'm like gasping for air, but also trying to scream and wake up at the same time. I mean, it was just bugged out.
I actually heard someone mention very similar reference before, where they said that they felt like they were pinned. They felt like they were pinned between something and it was crushing them. So that is very intriguing. Now, what if you could describe the woman, the best you can? I know it's hard whenever you see any type of spirit. It's usually hard to describe them because you don't always see facial features, more of outlines, or sometimes just the shape of them. But how would you describe the woman if you could?
She was wearing like I guess like a black like a house robe or something like that, but it was all like cut up and torn up and stuff, and then like she didn't really have like a face, but you could tell she was old because it was like the hair was like gray. It was like gray hair, but it wasn't really. I don't really know how to explain it because it was hair, but it really wasn't hair. I really, it's hard to explain that part, but you can definitely tell it was a woman.
It is hard to explain it because as someone who's seen a lot of spirits myself, you see it, but you don't see it. And for people that never experiencing, it's hard for them to understand, where you see their shape, you see them, you see their hair, you see features, but at the same time, you don't see it how you see one another, as if you were looking at me and I was looking at you. So you see the hair, but it's not hair. You can't necessarily always make out what the color of the hair would be. A lot of times it does look white, and a lot of times it can be. My first experience ever was actually seeing a very older gentleman in my home as a 6 to 7 year old boy, standing down my hallway and just staring at me, and it left me frozen. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. My mom seen me and ran over to me and was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And same thing. I could see that he had white hair. I couldn't exactly make out his face, but I could see him. And it was very similar to the fact I didn't feel necessarily like I had pressure on my chest, but I felt like someone stole the wind straight out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there and was trying to gasp, and I couldn't talk. And it wasn't until he vanished from my sight that all of a sudden my breathing came back, my senses came back, and I was able to tell her mom there's a man in the house, which freaked her out because at that point she thought I'd actually seen a real man, which I did, but a living man. And she was running around the house grabbing stuff, looking for like a weapon she could use, looking it through the rooms, thinking someone snuck into her house, and there wasn't anyone. And that was the beginning of what became a whole life full of just hundreds of events that I've personally experienced. So very interesting story. And you said once, and that lasted totally about an hour, you said?
It felt like it was an hour. It probably wasn't, but just like in my head, it just felt like I was just stuck there for an hour.
Okay, because time can, obviously, in a time of terror like that, minutes can seem like hours, so absolutely. Now, since that specific occurrence, have you ever seen her again or ever felt anything such as sleep paralysis ever again?
No, not since that. There was a time when I was younger, but it wasn't as intense as this time. But after that, like I said, after I woke up and, I realized that I was awake for real, I just told her, "You got to take me home. I'm not staying here." I couldn't do it. And she's like, "Well, why not?" And I'm just not explaining anything to her. I don't want to talk about what just happened. Just take me home,
Absolutely. Now, did you ever return back to that home?
Never. I'll never go back there again.
And
Not
that's
even just to walk in there for a second. I'll never. I wouldn't. I just feel I wouldn't be able to, because even I stay over in Holiday, Florida now, which isn't that far from Tampa, but like I frequent with Tampa, so every time I even drive near that house, I just get chills and goosebumps on my arms, and I'm just like, nah, I can't go back in there.
A moment like that can certainly stick with you, and I don't blame you. And another thing a lot of people, have often mentioned, which actually, ironically enough, your story is about sleep paralysis tonight and seeing things in the nighttime. Our next show, we do 2 shows a month, one of which we dive into specific topics, me and my co-host, and then the other episode per month is just me doing the listeners' phone calls, such as yourself tonight. And our very next episode, which is on the 28th, is strictly about night terrors, sleep paralysis, and other nighttime demons that are oftentimes been seen by thousands across the world in all different areas of life and backgrounds. And the woman's been mentioned several times, and more often than the woman has been mentioned the man in the top hat, where there has been many people who have seen him.
Whoa, okay, yeah, that was that just gave me chills, because that I've seen that also. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're absolutely fine. And as I told the folks before I brought you on the line, is I had somewhat of an idea what you were going to mention tonight, specifically on that first story with sleep paralysis to an extent. But I told them I like to let my guests share with me a little bit about what they're going to talk about, but I don't want them to fully tell me, because I like to hear it as they are and it be a shock to all of us. So as you hear that, folks, we did not talk about the man in the top hat, so that's very funny that that's happened. That is something that has been seen not only all around the world, but has been being seen for decades upon decades at this point. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that specifically?
Wow. I'm sorry, that just really sent me through a loop that you even brought that up. I was younger. I was probably, I want to say maybe 7 or 8. And it was me, my mom, my sister, and my father. We were living all in a house or whatever. Well, my sister and my cousin were actually in the basement, and they decided they wanted to play with a Ouija board that night. So they were in the basement playing with the Ouija board. I had no interaction with it whatsoever or anything. I was upstairs in my room. And I just happened to come downstairs. I want to say it was probably about 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock. All the lights are off downstairs. It's kind of a big house, so you have like a living room, the dining room, and then you have the kitchen to go to. So as I'm making my way down the steps, I go to turn the corner to go through the living room, and I look in the kitchen. You can see straight to the kitchen. There's just a man sitting in a top hat in a chair, but you could tell it's a man, but you can also tell, okay, this is just a shadow to an extent. And he's sitting in the chair with his legs crossed, and it's like he's sitting there like smoking a cigarette, but there's nothing in his hand. He's just got this top hat on, and like I just froze. And he turns and looks at me. He gets up, and behind our kitchen there was like a little laundry room, and then in that laundry room it leads to the backyard. Well, he gets up out the chair, walks straight to the laundry room, and walks right out the back door, like through the back door. And that really messed me up. That really messed me up that you even would bring that up. That you said that. That just.
Well, Aaron, everything is connected. I'm someone who's very spiritual, so a lot of people know me from my music and things as we know one another, but on a person-to-person basis, I'm very spiritual and believe in a lot of things like metaphysics and energy and connection. So sometimes things happen beyond our knowledge and even knowing why, and there could have been a reason that was brought up because that was not planned. And it's funny that you mentioned, one of the key things you just mentioned there was you could see it was a man, but you couldn't see the man. And that has actually been said time and time again. Every time that I've ever heard the story of the man in the top hat, no one sees his face. No one can see him. They see strictly the outline and dark shadow man that's in a top hat. They've never seen his face. And anyone that I've ever heard tell of seeing this person has always said that just absolute fear had struck them at the time that they had seen them. Almost a freezing just messed them up, as you said, where you just froze in place and were shocked because somehow not only does he give off that dark presence and visits people, but he also somehow controls that fear. I've seen a lot of spirits. I've seen ones that had no fear whatsoever when I've seen them, and it was fine. I've seen ones that made me feel strange. I've seen ones that have incite massive panic in me. I've never specifically had the night terrors, and I've never specifically seen the man in the top hat. So both very interesting stories, and like you said, very funny that that came about because that was not planned. But I think you said you had one more story for us this evening?
Oh no, that's it. Like
that was the second one. Okay. Well,
I'm sitting here shaking right now after just talking
so you
about
you told me you did have two stories, and that was the second one. Wow. So I thought that was just kind of a sidestep to it, and you were going to tell us another one. That actually was the second. Wow. So, okay.
Yeah. That's why I'm kind of bugged out right now that you even brought that up. Wow.
Oh, my. Well, hey, you know what? Like I said, everything's connected without us knowing. But, well, I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight, sharing with us and the world, your experiences and encounters. Not only do we want to hear about this from people out there, we want to, see similarities that people have all experienced the same thing, because you have believers, you have people that don't believe. Oftentimes the people who don't believe are people that have never seen the things that we have. But for those that have experienced it, I want to gather a lot of knowledge of, similar things that people have seen, things that maybe are completely left field. I'm compiling a database of all this information and stories to try to help figure some of these things out, to put more value behind them and more knowledge behind them, and ultimately maybe someday down the road making a book out of this and trying to compile like an encyclopedia of the paranormal. And, everybody's story certainly helping with that and helping us, dig a little bit deeper into the unknown. So I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight, and thank you for sharing us your stories.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. Definitely a pleasure. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, man, just thank you.
Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard from Aaron from Florida, a.k.a. Sleep Lyrical. And if you liked what he had to say, make sure you go ahead and you leave us a comment. Let us know your questions and concerns, and we will go ahead and answer them as soon as we can. We will be bringing another caller on the line in just a moment, and stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back, and we do have our second caller on the line. We have Nicole from California, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself and tell us her story of what she's encountered. Go ahead, Nicole. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you've experienced.
Well, I'm Nicole, born and raised in California, Alameda and Tracy, actually. So my incident happened when I was residing in Tracy. It was probably, I want to say like 10-ish. We lived on a duplex, and I had the biggest room in the house, and I could sit on my roof, which is what I did all the time. And I remember I hated my curtains not being long enough to where you could see any kind of crack on the outside of the house. I just felt like somebody was watching me all the time. I don't know why, but there's a little box, those little boxes that cover like your outlets on the outside of your house.
Okay.
And I remember I sat on my roof all the time, and that box was always off. I always stared at it. But anyways, if you looked in front of my bed, there was 2 giant square windows. I did not have blinds on because my mom didn't buy me blinds yet. And then across from the bed, there was, I think, 3 really long square windows, or rectangle windows, I guess. And those had blinds on them. And then I lined books up underneath it so you couldn't see outside whatsoever. So I remember I'm falling asleep the one night, and I just hear like very light tapping on those long windows across from my bedroom. And it woke me up, and I thought something of it, and I'm like, maybe it was really nothing. And then whatever it was kicked that box on that roof, and it walked from that roof over to the other roof where the big square windows were in front of my bed, where the windows that had no blinds on them. And all I could hear was it kick it. It shuffled over to those windows, and it made this gross tapping sound that I still remember. It was like tap, tap, to tap, 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 tap. And this person started talking, and she said, "Help me. I can't find my car." And I remember I couldn't breathe, and I got really clammy. And she must have switched back to the other window because she kicked it again. And I hurried up and ran into my brother's room. And I'm like, there's somebody on the roof. And he woke up all kind of mad because he was sleeping. He brought a baseball bat. We went outside. It was probably like a 30-second transition to all of this. And there was nobody outside. It was just crazy. So whatever it was, like, talked to me. It made its way onto my roof. And within, like, you know, the couple of minutes it took me to hurry up and run from my room to his and then us get outside, there was nothing.
Now, what time of the night would you say this was?
Probably, I don't know. It was probably more towards like the morning time, like maybe 4 a.m.
Okay, because that would make sense. I mean, it can be any time of the night or even day. A lot of times, miscommunication of people who think they know about paranormal things will say, okay, well, paranormal stuff happens at night. Well, there's a very high volume of paranormal things that happen during the day as well, but oftentimes the witching hour, 3 a.m., is when a lot of things happen between 3 to 4, and really actually between midnight to 4 is the heaviest section of time that people notice. Now, I think a big part of that is during the day we don't believe we see things that we see at night. So we see something happen during the day, we're like, yeah, we're just imagining it, or you don't pay as much attention to it. There's light out, but when things are dark, you see things better. When things are dark, they're quieter, you hear things better, and you're also more apt to pay attention, I think. So, you know, things can happen all day long, but yeah, definitely early morning is when a lot of things do happen. Now, the voice is interesting. You hear people talk from time to time, or hear voices. To hear, you know, I can't find my car is definitely a unique one. Have you ever sensed that experience, ever heard, you know, any voices, and have you ever heard that woman's voice again?
I haven't, no, and I haven't, you know, experienced anything like that since then. But I've also, I mean, I read into this stuff all the time too, like some sort of portal window between that realm and just like the human nature is, like, some people have that kind of gift, I guess, where
Indeed they do.
You know, other passed on individuals can reach out to certain people in the living world, quote unquote, I guess. But no, she specifically was aiming for my house and was able to tap on the window and talk. I can just imagine it was, you know, somebody maybe that died in a car accident, or, you know, maybe she got even kidnapped or hurt and she was just looking for her car. But it was minutes. So it was no time for anybody to jump off. And because, I mean, I've told this story to a couple people and they're like, well, maybe it was a real person. They were just messing with you or this and that. It was not whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, sometimes it can be isolated events where maybe you don't have necessarily a gift and you just happen to have a one-off where you, for some reason, were communicated to. It can be something where you are frequent, and as I used at the beginning of this show, which you couldn't have heard because this one's not live tonight, but you'll hear after the fact if you listen back. At the beginning, I had mentioned the fact that I hate the term, but I'm very sensitive to the paranormal, meaning that I see, hear, and experience a lot and have well over, 100 individual times. Why, I don't know. I always have been someone that they've communicated with heavily, and I've always had that gift, and I don't, fret that I do have it. I actually enjoy the fact that I have it because I think it's allowed me to think differently and experience things differently than most. But as you said, it could have been someone who was in an accident of some sort, someone who maybe was looking for their car, couldn't find it, and something happened to them. They wandered into the wrong area, they walked down the wrong street, got hit. It's hard to say what exactly happened, but interesting. Sometimes people have visitations like that, and they have reoccurring visitations from the same person that for some reason connected with you, and they stay with you. Other times, as you said, it can be something you experience one time and never hear from that person again. Now, I guess a question that I would have is, how long after that event did you guys still live in the house?
It was a good while.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if maybe you moved and that's why, or if you were still there for a good bit.
No, we were still there for a good bit. Yeah, I never heard from that person again. I was a kid. I was scared. But, looking back, obviously, that was a long time ago. I don't feel like I felt any fear from it, because I've been in other people's houses that did have like haunting spirits in it, and you can feel the energy from these spirits, whether it's a good or a bad one. And I felt bad and I felt good. And I mean, I don't think I felt bad. I think I was just scared.
You weren't so scared of the feeling. You were scared that it was something unknown to you that you'd never experienced, but it wasn't that specific
Right.
entity was causing you fear.
Right.
And we spoke about that on our last call, which, like I said, you wouldn't have heard yet, but we actually kind of talked and touched base on the fact that there are some that don't cause fear and you're just fine with seeing and experiencing that. There's some that, for one reason or another, they give off the feeling of fear or terror, which we talked about on our last caller's experience, where there was just straight terror. And it was by a specific entity that has been seen thousands of times. And every time that this one has been seen that I've heard of all across the world, it has excited a lot of fear in the person who has seen it. So it's funny how that there's different feelings to the spirit world and different things that people pick up from it. And we really appreciate you obviously coming on the show tonight and share. Was there any other? You said I think that was the main profound experience that you have experienced, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that was the main one. The other one, it's kind of simple. I lived in a house where somebody had unfortunately hung themselves in. And I remember I was laying on the couch, and if I looked up to my staircase, I put a mirror at the bottom of it. So if I looked in the mirror, it would shine up through the stairs so I can see who's coming up and down the stairs. And I remember I just looked over at the mirror and I seen like this translucent legs, just the bottom of someone's legs just walking up, and then it went away. And at the time I thought it was, my boyfriend, and I called out to them, and he was, he wasn't up there. He was down in the basement doing laundry. But that was the only other one that was, and I didn't feel afraid of that either. I was like, oh, I don't feel scared. I don't feel like when I walk downstairs from the bathroom or the kids' rooms that I should run.
Well, that's
it
a good
feels
thing.
Okay.
That's a good thing not to feel the fear. Now, I know you were scared the first one that you had mentioned because of just it being new to you, but have you ever experienced any type of encounters with the spirit world where there was that actual fear? I know you said that you kind of felt the thickness and heaviness in other people's homes that had hauntings.
Yeah.
But have you ever encountered anything solely yourself that at that moment you were strictly in terror?
No.
Okay, that's a good thing. I mean, I have myself on numerous occasions, and have talked to several who have, as I said, my last caller, and it is a certain type of feeling that if you haven't experienced it, you can't understand. And hopefully, if you're listening out there, you never do experience it. So, but if you have experienced it and you've experienced anything like this, please know that you can contact us to try to be on the show, and you can message us at Brutal Business Entertainment, or I should say Brutal Business ENT at gmail.com. Send us an email, brutalbusinessent at gmail.com, and inquire about being on the show. Give us a brief rundown of your experience, or at least what it's about. You don't have to go in depth with me. As I said, I like to hear it at the same time you guys do. But at least give me kind of an idea. Is it ghosts? Is it cryptids? Is it UFOs? Is it demons? That way I kind of have an idea, and we can try to get you on the show. We're always looking for new people to share their experiences. But we do want to thank you, obviously, Nicole, for coming on the show tonight and sharing with us your experiences. And we look forward to having you listen to the show. And maybe if you ever experience anything again, not saying that I hope you do, but if you do, you can always maybe get back on the show again and we'll hear what you have to say.
Sounds good. I hope I don't, but sounds good.
Absolutely. Well, listen, you have a wonderful night.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, that is Nicole's story of what she's experienced, and we're going to go ahead and jump into our next call in just a moment. All right, guys. We have our third and final caller for the evening. We have Corey from Pennsylvania, and he's going to come on the line and tell us a little bit about his experience. Corey, thank you for coming on the show. Introduce yourself and tell us what it is that you encountered.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name's Corey Smith. Back in the day, I went to church camp, and there was a church session going on. Everyone was standing around. They were praying. And, I had an experience. Basically what happened was this girl, she stood up. They're from Philadelphia. They really weren't into the program. They didn't really want to seem like they wanted to be there. But this girl stood up and started thrashing around, yelling, screaming, kicking. And I look over, and she's screaming, and the pastor and stuff come over, and they circle around her, and they're all praying, and it seems to, aggravate her more. She starts yelling. She drops to the ground. She's thrashing around. The pastor comes over and tells everyone to close their eyes and not to look. So I'm standing there. I'm closing my eyes, and, I just get this overwhelming feeling just to look over. And as soon as I do, I look over, and out of my peripherals, I see a guy sitting in the back, all the way in the back by himself, last pew, and he just happens to look to his left and jumps back like he looks like he's seen like a ghost almost. At that very moment, I felt cold. I felt empty. The joy of everything, the joy of the activities going on that night was just gone. And I thought to myself, what was this, And I keep continuing to pray, trying to, shield myself, shield my faith from what was going on. And all this is happening at the same time. I look at him, that she's thrashing around. I get this feeling, and at that very moment, whenever this all happens, she just stops. This lady just stops thrashing. She stops moving around. She just lays there, and everything starts going back to normal. People start heading to their seats and sitting down and stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, what just happened? And to me, whenever I looked at this fella, I seen a face. I seen in my mind, in my soul, like deep down inside of me, I seen a face with hollow eyes and a long chin that just sat there, just looked at me deep into my soul, and it created fear, I think, Well, I put it aside. I'm like, I'm just overthinking this. This is nothing, blah, blah, blah. So everything's going back to normal. People sit down. And this pastor, he's up there talking. About 3 to 5 minutes later, this counselor just comes up out of the back of the room. Same guy walks up, pushes the pastor off to the side of the podium, gets on the microphone, and stands there and explains to everyone that as he was sitting there and this girl was thrashing around, he started getting these weird sensations, and he had his eyes closed, he's praying, and he just felt like something was to his, sitting beside him. And he said that he looked up, he looked to his left, and it looked like a face just looked right back at him, smiled, and shook its head no. And he said that at that moment, his faith was just like it put in a lockbox and he couldn't access it no more. He's explaining this, and I'm sitting there dumbfounded that I felt the same way, that I feel like I seen the same thing at the same time, and the girl's reaction all ended at the same time. Well, proceeding after all this stuff, everyone goes back to their normal lives and stuff. Well, come to find out, this guy, he just stops going back to church. He leaves the whole program, everything like that. Comes to find out that he kills himself shortly after. He fell in a deep depression. Me, myself, personally, after it happened, I still feel disconnected from going to church, the connection of God and stuff. And it was a devastating thing for me. I was only 16 when this happened. And before and still after, I question, are things like that real? But every time, my mind just brings me right back to that, is what did you see that someone else seen at the same time? If it was just me, it wouldn't bother me. I'd just say, whatever, that was just dumb. I was thinking about it, probably an old movie. But for someone to come up that was by himself in the back of the building, not talking to anyone, to have a weird reaction like he did, and then come in front of 100, like it was 150, 200 people, and explain exactly what I seen in detail, just startled me. And I feel like stuff like that is real to an extent, People good.
I was sorry to interrupt. I was going to say that, there's definitely, there's definitely forces, and it's funny, tonight's show, several things that have been said between me and a caller has actually connected with something else that the caller said before us. We were just talking about the fact of possession and demons. We talked about the feeling sometimes you can see a spirit and it be no big thing. Sometimes you see one and you're excited with fear. And, it kind of connects with this, that you felt the fear, he felt the fear, something was wrong. Both of you seeing the same thing, which obviously gives validation to what had happened. And one of the big things is there is a lot of demonic spirits that have, if you study this type of topic, which I do heavily, demonic spirits are known, certain kinds of demonic spirits, not all of them, but there's certain types, I like to call them feeders, that they feed off of the life energy of someone once they connect to them. So if they find a way in and can latch themselves onto you, it's not necessarily to be misconstrued with a normal possession. It's not to say that you at that moment are possessed like the girl might have been thrashing around. This is where they found a weakness and seeped in, and they cling to you. They're clingers. They're sucking you and draining of your life force. And a lot of times associated with that comes depression, comes dullness of life, where people that you once seen who were happy and bubbly and great people start to seem depressed and sad, like nothing has joy for them in life, and they can't tell you why. They don't know why. They just can't seem to be happy anymore. It's because they have something, in some cases, some of it's other elements, obviously, but things of this nature where this gentleman seen this, you seen it, and it seemed to have taken shape with him, and then he obviously had taken his own life. There is a very good chance that something did connect itself with him, and unfortunately might have been the cause of that to happen to him. That is something that I have seen and read about and researched heavily, actually, over the years, so that would make sense. Now, a question I had was the girl. Mm-hmm. After that happened, did she stay in the program? Was that her last night there? Was she gone after that? What do you know what happened to her after that experience?
She just stopped thrashing around, went back to her seat. It was almost like it didn't happen. Like, another thing that really got me was the kids, this girl plus like the group of friends and stuff that they came with were like from Philadelphia. They were just like, they didn't take the thing serious. They didn't take the program, just the whole thing. They just didn't want to be there. It was almost like a summer camp just to get away. And it was just always fun and games to them. And for one of the girls that really showed that she didn't even want to be there to have that reaction, brought me to thinking even more. But to my knowledge, I haven't seen her whenever, like the following year and the year after, I haven't seen her there.
Yeah, I would think probably after that experience, she didn't want to go back, because she was probably a little thrown off by what did happen and didn't want to be involved with that again, because obviously that's a traumatic experience for anyone. So very
Absolutely.
Interesting, obviously. I mean, it's a shame that unfortunately that gentleman lost his life, whether it be at his own hand and it was his own decision to do so, or it was something beyond that causing him to do so. Certainly a sad circumstance. And actually had mentioned something separate. It wasn't so much possession, but my story tonight, not every show will I do this, but certain stories I will give stories of my background and things I've experienced, because I've experienced a lot. I had told one of my other callers that I hate the term, but I am very sensitive to that, meaning that I'm very open to seeing and hearing things, and always have my whole life. And I'm of sound mind. I'm not on any type of drugs, as I mentioned earlier in the show. It's something I've always been able to experience with a clean mind. And my first story tonight was about a demonic experience that happened to me within the last month or so. And there's been many that have happened to me within life, including twice in my life, as I mentioned last call, seeing demonic possession. So what you've experienced, I've actually seen firsthand twice, maybe in a different context, because there's many different types of demons and things out there. But I have actually experienced that twice now in my life, and both of the people who it happened to around me, they're still here, thankfully, and hopefully nothing ever happens to them, but neither of which will ever let me bring up the story of it, will not let me talk to it. As soon as I do, you can tell it switches something in their brain. They become very uncomfortable. They start like fidgeting around in their chair. They start to become almost scared again, and it affects them. and has affected their life since then. So it is very real, and it definitely has happened and will happen again to people. So we do appreciate you sharing that experience, because that is a little bit more on the hardcore spectrum of experiences beyond your just ghost sighting. That is something that is very visceral and very extreme.
Yeah, and it's still like I still think about it today. You know, if I wake up and I'm like, you know, I want to go to church or something, it's still like it's almost like a block or a wall. You know, I feel like it actually affected me overall. You know.
And it could have, and that's what they hope to do in a lot of cases, is weakness of mind. A lot of times demons do try to get people who are already sad or depressed or who are down on life, because they have weak defenses and they can seep in easily. Now, this man might have been a man of faith, but maybe he had a lot going on that people didn't realize, and he became an easy target. And while everyone was focused on the girl, it left him open for, attack in this case. And that's the best way I can kind of phrase it, but that very well could be. It's hard to say. I don't want to speculate because I wasn't there to know. But something or another caused that thing to come, and something caused it to attach itself to two people, one specifically causing harm, the other one we don't know because we don't know where she's at in the world. And for all we know, something could have happened to her as well. But very, very intriguing, very interesting. If anyone's listening out there, once we do air this show, and you have any comments, concerns, or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will certainly address them. And we really appreciate you coming on the show tonight and sharing us your experience and telling us a little bit about what you've seen.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, you have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Take care. You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, you heard it firsthand, folks. 3, or I should say, if you include mine, 4 incredible stories of encounters and things that, or actually more than 4 in this case, because Aaron told us 2, and there were some other ones that were told by the callers tonight. So multiple experiences and stories and encounters of the paranormal, and also of demonic possessions and demonic spirits tonight. We do want to thank Aaron, Nicole, and Corey for being on the show tonight. As I mentioned previously, if you are listening out there and you've had something happen to you that's unexplainable and you would like to share it to the world, whether you want to give your name or you want to stay anonymous, that is fine. You can message us at brutalbusinessent@gmail.com, brutalbusinessent@gmail.com. Tell us a little bit about your experience, and if it seems like it would be a good fit for the show, I'd be glad to get you on. As mentioned, this show will be airing on the 21st, which is next Wednesday, and we will air that at 8 p.m. It'll run from roughly 8 p.m. to a little after 9. If you are hearing it, please hit the share button, and make sure you check out our episode next week, which would be the 28th, which is me and Daniel James talking about sleep paralysis, night terrors, and other nighttime entities. We do want to thank you for listening in tonight. As before I mentioned, I am Garrett Jagaman. This is Celestial Oddities, Pair of Normal Guys podcast. Hit that share button, hit that like button, and tell your friends. We appreciate you checking us out, and we'll see you next time. Take care and have a great night.